The alarm clock buzzed. Sarah groaned, hitting the snooze button. Another day was beginning. She dragged herself out of bed, the city sounds already filtering through her window. Coffee was first on the agenda, then a quick yoga session to energize herself. Work at the bakery always promised to be hectic. The aroma of baking bread was comforting. Customers rushed in and out, grabbing their favorite pastries. Sarah's smile never faltered, even as the hours flew by in a blur of flour, sugar, and friendly chatter. After work, she met up with her friends at their usual spot, a cozy cafe tucked away on a quiet street. Laughter and gossip filled the air. Life felt normal, ordinary. Little did they know. Back in her small apartment, Sarah kicked off her shoes, a sigh escaping her lips. This was her sanctuary, and it was time. The familiar tingling sensation started in her toes, spreading upwards like a wave. It reached her head, and then she was lighter than air. With a gentle push, she rose above the ground. She was flying. It was a secret she had guarded for years, a gift bestowed upon her by a mysterious encounter she could barely remember. But that was a story for another time. For now, she reveled in the freedom of soaring through her apartment, a giddy laugh escaping her lips. Another wave of tingling, this time accompanied by a strange blurring at the edges of her vision. She disappeared, becoming completely invisible. Flying was exhilarating, but invisibility, that was her true power. Her cat, Whiskers, watched with wide, unblinking eyes as a croissant vanished into thin air. It reappeared a moment later, floating gently across the room. Whiskers, never one to back down from a challenge, jumped onto the coffee table, batting at the floating pastry. It bobbed and weaved, propelled by an unseen force. Sarah, invisible and giggling, continued to control the croissant's flight path. Whiskers, determined, followed the pastry's every move, his tail twitching with anticipation. The scene was pure, chaotic joy. It was their little game, a secret shared between a woman with extraordinary abilities and her bewildered but entertained feline companion. Section 4. The Curious Case. Meanwhile, Mr. Jones, Sarah's downstairs neighbor, was having a less than enjoyable evening. He had just returned from a particularly trying day at work to find his apartment unusually messy. He could have sworn he left his reading glasses on the table. And was that a croissant floating outside his window? His eyes widened in disbelief. His apartment. He grabbed his trusty base with an actual use. He cautiously approached the window, adrenaline starting to pump in his veins. He was ready to confront the pastry bandit. Section 5. Vanishing Act and an Unexpected Guest. Sarah, still invisible, decided to have a little more fun with her floating croissants. She steered them towards Mr. Jones's open window, enjoying his bewildered reaction. She hadn't anticipated his next move. Mr. Jones, convinced he was dealing with a very peculiar burglar, charged towards his door, flinging it open. He was met with nothing. The coast was clear, or was it? He took a hesitant step outside, baseball bat at the ready. Suddenly, he felt a force pulling him forward. He stumbled, his world turning upside down as he was dragged, completely bewildered, into Sarah's apartment. Sarah, still invisible, shut the door behind him. Mr. Jones lay sprawled on the floor, his baseball bat rolling across the room. He blinked, trying to process what had just happened. This night was getting stranger by the second. Section 6. A deal struck in the air. "Who's there?" Mr. Jones shouted, scrambling to his feet, his voice trembling slightly. He glanced around the room, but it appeared empty. He was alone. Suddenly, a vase rose from the coffee table, hovering in mid-air. Then a book, then another. Mr. Jones watched in disbelief as objects danced around him, as if controlled by an unseen puppet master. Sarah chose that moment to reveal herself. She reappeared, her back to Mr. Jones, arms still outstretched, controlling the floating objects. She turned, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Boo!" she said, a playful smirk on her lips. Mr. Jones's jaw dropped. He pointed a shaky finger at her, then at the floating objects, then back at her. Words failed him. "I can explain," Sarah began, but Mr. Jones, still in shock, just shook his head, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before his eyes. Seeing the terrified look on his face, Sarah decided to take a different approach. She walked towards him, her feet leaving the ground. She was floating. "I can fly," she stated simply, her voice gaining confidence. "And I can become invisible." Mr. Jones, speechless, could only stare. She continued, "Please, you can't tell anyone about this. It's my secret." Mr. Jones, finally finding his voice, stammered, "A secret? You can fly and be invisible," Sarah added with a wink, gently lowering herself to the ground. But how? He was a man of science, of logic. What he was witnessing defied all reason. Sarah just shrugged. "It's a long story," she said, "but you can't tell anyone." Mr. Jones, still trying to wrap his head around the situation, could only nod. He had just witnessed the impossible. An idea struck him. Can you take some pictures of me? You know, flying?" He felt ridiculous asking, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Sarah, relieved that he wasn't going to expose her secret, chuckled. "I suppose I could manage that," she said. "Consider it a trade for keeping quiet." And so a deal was struck. Mr. Jones, sworn to secrecy, became the keeper of an extraordinary secret, a testament to the fact that even in the most ordinary lives, magic can be found, soaring high above the mundane.